Hey, Mingata. Oh, you're muted?
I was just bragging about how I was the first one here for a second, but
Oh.
opportunity.
Yeah, everyone's queued up until I unleash the floodgates and they come in. I'm continually surprised, though, that we even have anybody showing up, given that it's this time of the year. So,
We're all at home, right? What else are we doing?
yeah. So, we'll give people another minute to show up. We have Gong set up now, and Gong is automatically kicking off these recordings for me. So, it's I need to update our workflow somehow around this.
What's the service called? Gong? Gong.
Gong, yeah, Gong.io. It's like a CRM for your meeting recordings and conversations.
Cool. I was using Fred Fireflies or Fireflies recently with Google Meet. Um,
Okay.
not This looks a little more comprehensive.
Yeah, no, it's a very legit solution and supports every video conferencing thing out there. So even if your organization uses multiple platforms, you can bring them together with this, and then it ties into your CRM, whether that be Salesforce or HubSpot. We use HubSpot, and you can tie it all together and come up with workflows. It's pretty rad.
Nice. I was chatting with a vendor sometime in the past couple months, and they've got like this AI bot that'll join. And I guess as they're talking to us, the AI bot will, I guess, ping them or like give them improve.
In Yeah, it might have almost been the same one. So Gong has two integrations. One is a bot that joins, and you can rename that bot to whatever you want it. And they might have just been using that. I see it with so many other customer conversations or calls that I'm on with that. Anyway, sorry. Let me get started here. It is time to kick things off. Hey everyone, welcome to Office Hours. It's December 30th, 2020. My name is Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. You got to hear a little bit of our water cooler conversation before Office Hours today. A little different format, I guess. So yeah, I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We are a DevOps accelerator. And that means that we help companies own their infrastructure in record time by building it together with your team and then showing them the ropes. So if that sounds interesting, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. Again, that's cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. For those of you new to the call, the format is very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered. So feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you want to jump in and participate. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/office hours. We host these calls every week. We'll automatically post a video recording of this session to YouTube, as well as follow up with an email so you can share it with your team. So with that said, let's kick it off. I managed to get a few things out here. One was actually from yours truly, Venkata here, is that I want to issue a retraction of something that we suggested last week, which was based on incomplete information. And that's my fault for spreading these horrible lies and rumors that Amazon would release a product fully baked. And they did not. So Amazon Cloud Shell is something really awesome for enterprise environments, especially where you have no control over your workstation and what you can install. But unfortunately, they decided let's take that and extend it to the cloud. So we will not let you run Docker in this shell to run your tool chain because in DevOps we don't use Docker anymore, right? Or not. So yeah, currently it does not support Docker in these containerized environments. You can install Docker, you just can't run it or do anything, which is super annoying. So thanks, Mikata, for speaking up. Sorry, everyone, for sending you down a rabbit hole. I'm sure they'll get to it. Any questions on that or anything else to add to that? All right, next topic, a little bit off the beaten path. 2016 or so, Cloud Posse was doing a little bit of Beanstalk, and turns out we have one of the more popular modules for ElasticBeanstalk. That said, we don't really use it, and I can't say that we are the best to provide the ongoing thought leadership for this. We'll continue hosting it. It's not getting deprecated. It's here. It's going to be tested. We'll eventually get to your pull requests. But we do have a bunch of pull requests piling up. And I would love if somebody who's using the Beanstalk module would step up. And if you want to help us maintain and review this, please reach out to me on Slack or email me or something like that. I'm pretty easy to find. So that's that. So there's a issue I opened up here, call for maintainers. Feel free to just also comment on this issue if you need. You guys see me? It just said that my network was switching or something.
Yep, you're fine.
All right, cool. Hey, Vlad, good to see you again.
Hey.
So last thing is just it's official. We are growing a lot in 2021. So we will be. My plan is so far to try and bring on one person per month or so every month of 2021, based on our current growth trajectory. So please get yourself into our pipeline if you're interested at some point working with Cloud Posse. So we know of you, and we have a job posting that's live. This is a call for U.S.-based subcontractors. So this is not W-2. And it's for senior level engineers. So please check that out. Andy, can you share the links from the slides in the channel? Sweet, thank you. All right, so talking points. Let's see. We've got a few good questions that came up. Some we've talked about before, but they come up again, so I'll just share them. But let's start with the first good question here. It came up from Pepe. Pepe is one of our open source community contributors. He has, if you've submitted a PR, he's probably reviewed and approved it at some point. He's amazing. So big shout out and thank you to Pepe for that. So let's answer Pepe's question. He can't join though today. But Venkata has the same question, so you can maybe add some color to it. As I pull this up here. Oh, pen test vendor. Okay, I didn't see that yet, but yeah, I'll bring up some thoughts on that. So this is the question here Pepe was asking. So looks like Pepe is making a foray into EKS. I know he's been using a lot of ECS, and he has a lot of good questions lately. Here's another one, kind of. What is the recommended way when using EKS clusters for, say, CICD or control plane management, and you want to keep the ingress private in a private subnet? Will that work? For example, we keep our CICD systems behind the VPN, and since I was playing with Argo CD, I was just using port forwarding option. So I think there were a couple suggestions here. Let's see, under the threads. And was it Mike? I think for ingress on private subnet, do ALB or NLB subnets. Yeah, that's good. Here's what I'm going to add to this. So obviously you guys can deploy VPN. VPNs are tried and true method of exposing internal services. And even based on what I'm about to say, you might still need to. Maybe you're using services that need layer 3, layer 4 connectivity, and don't just speak HTTP. However, Jenkins or your CI system is probably not one of those. Argo CD is not one of those. So you have two options here, I would say. One is expose Argo CD via a identity-aware proxy, which is this whole Beyond Corp security model stuff you hear, zero trust. This is like the biggest growth industry within DevOps for 2020 probably, because of COVID and the working from home madness. So with this, the way it works is you deploy, like HashiCorp has Boundary. We've been using Keycloak with Gatekeeper, which I don't recommend right now, so stay away from that. But Teleport released their application access proxy, which does it. Cloudflare has Access, or I think they call it One now. Okta has their proxy. Duo has their proxy. I can't keep track of how many of these solutions exist. And what it is it's still a VPN. It's just a different way of thinking about a VPN. So, like a traditional VPN, You connect to that VPN, it gives you layer 3, layer 4 connectivity, and depending on the sophistication of the VPN, might control what networks or machines you can connect to. But by default, it's usually overly permissive, and that's not what we want. So what is a VPN? It's basically TLS over a network with tunneling and some client you install to work with your local network interfaces and set up that point-to-point tunnel. What if we just simplified this whole thing and we just use HTTPS? And we do that already. Those are tunnels. And what if we stuck a authentication proxy in front of that connection, so when you authenticate it, make sure that you are who you say you are, it sends you a push notification, all that stuff, can time out your session, and it established one tunnel point-to-point for that one service. And if you want to log into that other service, the same thing happens over again, but it's a point-to-point tunnel for that one service. And it's all just regular HTTP. And that's what this whole Beyond Corp identity-aware proxy madness is all about, and why I recommend getting this in, because it solves a lot of the problems for once you have your CD system in, how are you going to access like your preview environments? Are those going to be public? You want to secure them? Or do you have to get on the VPN to access those as well? So yeah, as Vlad points out here, the teleport application access proxy is pretty sweet. We do have like 5 or 6 feature requests open for it, so we can get feature parity with what we have been doing with Keycloak, Gatekeeper, and Foxel, which is a application discovery dashboard by another party. All right, so that was a roundabout way of saying that. Okay, then the other thing is like how do you architect Argo in this situation that you're doing it? For those of you not familiar with Argo CD is to Kubernetes what Terraform Cloud or tacos are for Terraform. Basically, it only knows how to do Kubernetes, and if you want to do anything else, well, make it run in Kubernetes with an operator or something, and then it can do it. But it's not going to do any other kinds of deployments or delivery for you. And what's interesting about when you use Argo is that you can now separate like the separation of concerns. So Argo CD doesn't worry about where your so Argo CD is concerned about secrets, but your CI system isn't. And your CI system has therefore lesser access privileges. So when you set up Argo, you're connecting it so it's tunneling out of your environment, your VPC. So therefore, technically Argo doesn't even need to be public. It's public if you want to see the dashboards. And that's why you would want to expose it in some way. Your question is, like, do we create a separate automation cluster? Or how do we do it? And I haven't found a canonical best practice. Oh, thank you, Matt Gowie, for pointing out Tailscale. Seems like a really awesome solution. Simplifies the whole thing. We haven't yet tried it internally, but darn it, I'm going to make a note to do that because we have a specific use case for it right now. All right.
I've got a module coming for you soon, so I'll put that up at some point.
What was that, Matt?
I've got a module for this that I built out that I haven't implemented for a client yet. So it's built on Cloud Posse, example module. So I'll
cool. Mention so we can publish that. That's awesome. Thank you, Matt. That's really cool. We'll keep everybody updated if that makes its way out. So back on where I was saying, so I haven't found like a canonical, like official reference architecture for deploying Argo. I guess because depending on your complexity of your infrastructure, you might need more or less. But at a minimum, I would recommend at least 2 Argo CDs in your environment, because Argo CD is now in your critical path for doing your deployments, and you're going to need to do updates to Argo. You're going to need to be able to do those in a safe and sane way. And just like Jenkins, where Jenkins who needs HA? Who needs to think about having multiple Jenkins masters? Or you can pay enterprise and get it. Argo CD is kind of taking the same approach, which I don't blame them. It simplifies a lot. But if you need to upgrade any of the plugins for Argo, and you're deploying Argo with, in Docker under Kubernetes, you're probably going to have to redeploy it, and that's a disruptive operation, and you're going to want to minimize those in production. All right, so we've isolated it down that we need at least 2, so like prod and non-prod. But then the question is like, well, what if we, so you presumably you probably have like one prod environment, but you might have a dozen or more non-prod environments. So you have one Argo for those. Well, those might be, at least if you're a Cloud Posse customer, those are probably in multiple separate AWS accounts. So like you have a UAT account, you have a dev account, you got a sandbox account, you got a staging account, you got accounts. And if you only have one Argo for all those, well, now the scope has increased because how is Argo going to manage the connections to all those Kubernetes clusters? So that means you're going to have a transit gateway probably set up or VPC peering. So it increases the complexity. The other thing is like, so what if we just always deploy Argo per cluster in that case? So you got lots of Argos. Now you lose a little bit of the visibility on how things are getting deployed across multiple environments, and you also have the startup cost of, or the onboarding cost of getting those Argos set up. So the more fully automated you want this stuff to be, the more magical, the more effort it's going to be. All right, so that's on the Argo, like one or many or how many or question. But then the next question is like, how many repos? So Argo's done a lot of work to optimize this. It's I think a lot of it's been spearheaded by Intuit, that is big users of Argo CD. And the problem with GitOps is it really exasperates the problem of large repos over time. So if let's say we create one deployment repo per Argo instance. So if we had a prod and non-prod, we'd have a prod deploy and non-prod deploy repos, let's say. And in the non-prod environments, we're doing preview environments. So like for every pull request, we might be deploying a full set of the environment. That repo in a larger organization with a lot of activity, that's going to get pretty large. And while Argo has its caching service, which will continually fetch and pull that to keep it relatively up to date, there comes a point when it's ridiculous. And I don't know what point that is, especially if you're storing your images as part of your deployments for some reason. Like that tens of gigs is not unreasonable for a GitHub repository. So then it's like, well, maybe then we should be having multiple repos per Argo CD, or I don't know. So this is the reason why this is something I'm talking so much at length at. This is what we've been going through lately as we're trying to develop some best practices around this that we can ship with our customers. So anybody using Argo here or have more insights or something they want to bring up? Maybe Vlad or somebody?
A surprising way, I'm not using Argo CD or Flux or any of the fancy new GitOps things. They're not mature. They're not mature. I'm unhappy with that. Like Argo and Flux were supposed to merge and use the same code base. That went to shit, excuse my language. Flux v2 was launched. They're awesome. I played with them. I love them. I'm not gonna put them in production and get like 25% of my sprint randomly filled with Argo and Flux work. That doesn't work for me. Also, like, it depends. Doing GitOps for... There's automation that makes sense in GitOps, and there's automation that doesn't make sense in GitOps. If you are running a SaaS company and you gotta have an environment per tenant or something like that needs to be handled through code, through your application logic. I've seen people do that with GitOps and GitHub Actions, adding code and pushing environments and then automatically commenting Terraform apply and bullshit like that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. We've had to deal with it this year. We actually did what you said. Like we did for like these short-lived POC demo environments. We did actually not use Terraform, and we just used CLI-based controls with CloudFormation to trigger it for that reason. But yeah, boy, we're like splintering off here. So Venkata, how far have you come in your Argo CD journey? Do you have any other questions there, or did we just create more questions for you?
Maybe a couple comments. So I've deployed Argo CD, spent a few days last week getting my head wrapped around it. Intent being we want to do self-service for our development team. And
Yeah.
it's a pretty good option to do that. And the whole how many repos thing, and then on top of that, where do you put your Helm charts? Do you have one Helm chart, like do you have the Helm chart next to the source code, or do you have it like in one repo? So a lot of like, you know, a couple things to still be answered on my end. I am leaning towards one repo at the moment. I was able to bootstrap the cluster pretty well, like very easily with Argo CD, just having it bootstrap the ingress controllers and everything else. So yeah,
it's a semi-reversible decision. However, as soon as you realize, oh, new release of Argo came out.
So I was factoring in the recovery. I probably spent more time figuring out how do I break it and recover it than I was figuring out the directory structure. And your comment around 2 clusters, I was going down that path for a little bit, and I kind of, my opinion is right. I mean, there's some risk to this approach, but my opinion is I can disable the auto synchronization. And if I were to do that, then I should be able to dump out an export. Like the backup utility looks very solid from Argo CD, and then restore it with the new image, and it shouldn't synchronize to prod, but there is that situation where someone writes a bug and disabling the synchronization doesn't actually disable the synchronization, and then you get the new image and potentially risk your prod. But I see the benefit of 2 clusters. Maybe I think I'm probably going to, based off your comments of 2 clusters, I'm probably going to do one for all of pre-prod and then one for production. Maybe
you need some place for things to burn in too sometimes. And even if you can bring it up temporarily, it's not synonymous to running 2 separate environments.
I actually didn't know about the PR feature you were talking about, because my plan was to get my team going into the UI and clicking on the umbrella chart that they want to deploy the stack of, and then just having them do booleans of some sort to quickly say, yes, deploy this, or don't deploy this.
Yeah, no, so we've been doing preview environments for several years now, and the key is just to, if it fits your security model and everything else, it's so easy. If you have a chart and or a set of charts and you deploy those into a new namespace. So then you basically can have a folder structure where you have like a namespace for preview environment, and your CI process is just responsible for manipulating that repository.
Yeah, I actually didn't know. It sounded like you were doing it based off PRs. I thought when I looked at the Argo CD docs, you could only point it to one branch, right?
No, it's only pointed to one branch, but your CI, so it's a different, like conceptually slightly different. So what you're going to be doing is manipulating, well, if this case is the master branch, and what your process is for that will be up to you. Whether your CI can commit to master and whatever, fine. But you might want to have something like where master has branch protections, but then you have another branch for preview environments, for example, which doesn't have branch protections. And then branch protections can be scoped to the branch. So then you can allow your CI to do those preview environments automatically.
Cool. I'll definitely keep that in mind. And one quick comment around, you brought up the zero trust kind of proxy stuff. I think I'd also mentioned, just based off Mike's comment around running on a private subnet.
Yeah.
There's one caveat, I think, with the Argo CD, where if you deploy on a private subnet without like having ingress publicly available, I don't think you'll get the webhook feature where you can have it immediately changes. So
or you can find a webhook proxy out there, so you send through a select number of requests. Also with ingress, a less frequently used feature is the ability to so you can have first of all, a cluster can have multiple ingresses, controllers, and you can have a public ingress controller. And then what you can do is deploy a secondary upstream that just forks off the whatever the path is to the webhook URL, to that backend, but all other paths just 404. So, or go to the default backend, which is the 404 control.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't even think about that, as well as the proxy. That's a good idea as well. But just sort of throw that out there. I think by default, I timed it. It took as long as 6 minutes for Argo CD to pick up the changes after merging a commit. But not bad, but obviously want it a little faster.
Git webhook.
I have kind of a related
This was one of the
question.
ones I was thinking of. We haven't deployed it personally, but looks like it's still being maintained. Git webhook proxy by Staccato. Go on.
I have kind of a related question. I don't know if this is maybe frowned upon, but I've been playing with just the Argo rollouts component of
Right.
Argo CD. Like, I don't want to go full on Argo CD, or I don't
Right.
necessarily have the need at the moment. And I found that Argo rollouts itself works pretty well for what I'm interested in, and it fits well in my existing pipeline. I don't know if anyone's thought about that.
So I would say that's almost one of the biggest reasons to go for Argo is to use the rollouts extension so that you can do more advanced strategies, not just rolling updates, which is the built-in. So I guess my only pet peeve with it is that it's a totally separate custom resource, which means that you have to have your own custom charts for anything that's going to work with Argo. And I guess it makes sense, and it's only for pods, and it's not for all the other things that you might need.
Yeah, but the spec is more or less the same as the deployment. The rollout spec, I literally just templated my existing deployment or my Helm chart to basically consume my deployment resource and just rename it rollout with a couple extra knobs. It was pretty simple.
Actually, you could probably take any manifest and merge it through a JSONnet function that does it.
Yeah, that too, and I guess you can do I don't know this with Argo hooks. You can maybe do some pre-processing even to do that, but that sounds dangerous. What I was gonna say though is this is a perfect segue into another question you had in Kapta is like what to do with your charts and where to put those. Have you heard me talk about the mono chart and that pattern?
I've read about the mono chart. I may have heard you talk about it. Unfortunately, I'm not 100% sure.
Right. The gist of it is just identify the classes of applications your company has and create charts around those classes of apps. So if you have Node.js front ends and you got Python backends and you got some batch processing services or something. Those are the three patterns. So then come up with 3 types of charts. In our case, we just came up with a pretty universal chart, but that means that there's a lot of complexity and business logic in there. But now you centralize that, now you don't need to worry about charts anymore. It defines the interface of the application picks an interface, it enforces consistency in your organization and reduces the sprawl of charts and tech debt around it.
Yeah, and that sounds like the approach I was kind of going down. I was thinking of something where it's very templated. You can do a Boolean for you want to ingress or not. And making it support, different health checks, things like that. And then arguably it could go a little granular for the type of microservices being Java Spring Boot versus Node.js and just differences between the stacks. But I appreciate that. Do you check them all into the same repo, or do you?
Like in principle, I like the idea of keeping the chart close to the application so you can rev them at the same time. It introduces all these other complexities though because you're spanning tool chains and that your CI system and CD needs to be integrated with that. What I love about this alternative strategy that we're proposing is it decouples that, so it no longer makes sense to have it in any one repo of like the applications because it's an interface. So you would have a standard charts repository for those. And keep in mind with the Helm plugins, and if you're using Helm file, it supports it natively, you can just source charts directly from Git and you don't need to package artifacts anywhere.
Oh, cool. I actually didn't know I could do that straight from Git. So I've got
Argo does that too.
And Argo probably has support for that then. Okay, here's the thing, is like with Argo, it is making things like Helm file redundant, so you definitely don't need to use it.
Cool.
So yeah.
Cool. We should.
I mean, if you look at some of the sort of opinionated Argo examples today, actually, they really build on the fact that you pull things from various repos, many various repos. So actually, there's a lot of examples that does that.
All right, Mikael, were you on the first part of the call? I'm just curious if you have anything to add to like how to architect for Argo CD, repo structure, cluster architecture.
No, I can't say I have it for production because we don't run it in production yet. I just run it on the dev stacks.
Okay.
So I'm working on getting that integrated with Tanka, JSONnet, and what's it called, Tilt for a local development workflow. So I'm trying to make it, try to make all of that work in one single stack, either in Tilt or with Tanka from Argo.
How far have you come in the evaluation of Tilt?
I really like it so far. I only tried it with one app, but it's like, so I'm totally ignoring sort of the build part on the client side. I'm just assuming that I can jack in anything and make it work. But so far I really, really like it. It just picks up any change I do and deploys, pushes it to the Docker repo I have, set up. And it's in my case, I have a local Kubernetes cluster on my laptop, and I set it up so it pushes to a local host Docker repo, which is accessible from within the cluster and stuff like that. So it just transparently modifies the production manifests so that it points to the correct images that it's pushing, that it's building and pushing. So I really like it, but I don't have anything else to compare it with. I've looked at Scaffold, but I haven't tried Scaffold yet, so I can't say. What I've heard is that Tilt is sort of the next step up from Scaffold, but I can't say for sure.
And did you look at telepresence, which has been around for a while?
No, only briefly.
Okay.
I made a really failed attempt at making it work inside a different Docker development container, so I haven't tried it on my host.
Okay, well, thank you for the additional context. So, okay, then I wanted to just share the Helm Git plugin, which is this one is the best one. This guy's in our sweetops community as well, so feel free to reach out to him. Cool. Any other questions?
I guess I could maybe add one last thing about Argo.
Yeah.
That when you start using Argo, you always have the same issue of repeating environments. Say you want to repeat a certain environment 10 times and they all look slightly different, right? You need to customize it.
Yeah.
So now you need to customize the application itself, right? You need to repeat the actual Argo application because now the hard work you're doing when you move to Argo is writing the Argo CRD itself, right? The application spec itself. Yeah. So I haven't gotten to that part where I've made that comfortable yet. So that's the next thing, I guess.
What do you think about internal company tooling for developers that they just use a simple local CLI that you provide and your own like very simple YAML markup that then generates that stuff for you? Have you thought?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've seen your sort of YAML markup thing that you base your stuff off. I've looked at that for like years now.
Okay.
But so I'm very, very well aware of the option of doing that. Right now, I'm trying to get these applications I have, like I'm trying to make it work in the local developer workflow, right? So I'm trying to move everything inside JSONnet. So I'm moving everything inside of the JSONnet spec. So my tilt file is basically 2 lines. It reads data from JSONnet itself. So I'm trying to make everything on one place and just creating a tilt library that sort of reads the data from the same spot. So it's sort of the same thing, I guess, where the developer itself can do some overrides later on.
That sounds interesting. I'd love to see that sometime. I have not. I've not gone down that path, but I know that many are. So
I'm hoping I can make something interesting out of it.
Okay. So let's shift gears here quickly to, well, this is kind of a nice segue.
Eric?
Yeah. Hey, Mohammed.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Hi guys. So this is my first time. So hi everyone. What about Jenkins X? So did you guys, anyone here test it?
I can only talk about it anecdotally. We helped a customer move off of Jenkins X this year. They were mostly burned by the fact that Jenkins X has done a complete refactor, and to the point of who was it that just? Oh yeah, Vlad was saying earlier how all these tools are still pretty young. We're talking Flux and Argo CD. And Jenkins X2. So Jenkins X gutted the whole system and refactored it from scratch, and they were just burned by that and didn't want anything more to do with it. Now it's based on Tecton pipelines and some other stuff, but don't have any first-hand accounts of Jenkins X after that.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
I guess what I like about it, high level, is that it provides thought leadership on how to do this stuff, on how to do the CLI to manage it, how to do preview environments, how to promote changes, and I think there's a lack of that kind of thought leadership overall in the community. That said, it's opinionated, so it's going to be an invasive change in any organization to pick up Jenkins X. Much more so over than using tools like Argo CD, which are less opinionated on that. So, yeah. So, okay. So the question that Lauren was asking is, so Lauren is a frequent contributor as well in our sweetops community, and so he starts off asking a pretty straightforward question, which has an easy answer, of course, which is like, how do I run a Docker container and point it at my local files? And we all know that you can just mount the local volume, but I don't know, taking a step back, anybody, worked with Java over the last, 25, 30 years and, had to write Java commands out, like it's exhaustive, the parameters and how to do that. And that's kind of what has come of Docker. So you want a different kind of abstraction on that. So what Lauren really wants to do is, how can I run a binary in a Docker container but get a native-like feeling on my laptop? And this has become a pattern that a few of the developers on our Cloud Posse team have started using. I haven't personally used it, but they submitted some pull requests to make it work for OS X. So I know it works for OS X. I know it works for Linux. I don't know about Windows yet. And when you have NCLI installed, it gives you the ability to basically map. I think you create a dot file of some sort or config file of some sort that maps a command to a Docker container, and then you can now continue using that just like a native command on your MacBook. So I'll share this link here. Any questions on that?
I want to ask, why? Like, what's the desire behind doing this? I imagine it's not for Terraform because we have TFenv and other things that can handle the different versions. So I'm not understanding the need behind it.
Well, yeah, there's a thousand ways to do version management, and everyone I guess the one thing that is true is that there are factions of developers that look at it in different ways. I haven't seen his exact workflow, but Igor on my team, what he's been doing is something pretty, actually revolutionary almost, I think, which is related to release engineering. So in release engineering, this is going to be a use case that I'm going to get to why he ended up using NCLI and like it a lot, is your pipelines end up becoming applications themselves that are so complicated. And yet, they are testing your application, but nothing is testing your pipelines. And if we go back to this concept of like the mono chart and developing interfaces for your applications, or classes of charts for your applications, you can do the same thing with your pipeline. So here's our SPA pipeline for single page applications. Here's our Node.js microservice pipeline for those kinds of applications, and you create a few different classes of that. But now that all those things, it's centralized, you're reducing the tech debt and the maintenance burden. However, they're all in the critical path of your ability to release software. So you need to test those pipelines. What proved to be very tedious was running all of those steps, all of those tests, using like local pipeline emulations, like GitHub Actions support local execution, CodeFresh supports local execution, but it was very tedious, especially when the first 5 steps work and you're just iterating on this one step, step number 18 or whatever, I don't know. And having to rebuild the container and run it was very slow. So instead, what he did is he got the whole environment working natively on his laptop, so the scripting glue around all the tools, he could just run it locally. But the commands, which he didn't install locally, and the commands were all coming from these different images with the stuff. So it worked well for him. I don't have first-hand experience to testify that this is the holy grail, but this definitely solves the specific question that was asked of Lauren.
Thank you. Yeah, that explained it. Like, I couldn't imagine what workflow would need something like this. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you know, like Cloud Posse, we use geodesic for a lot of this stuff. So we just have all the commands in one container and then run the stuff inside of that. But yeah, this.
I mean, I have a specific use case. I have a specific use case for it actually, and it's because we have the same. We have our own geodesic container, you might call it, at our place. But then you have the case where maybe someone else wants to be onboarded, and maybe he wants to go on and do one thing in, you know, use our tools in our repo. Maybe he needs to run 2 commands out of all of those 30, 40, or 50, whatever it is in the container, right?
Yeah.
And now he has to download a 1 gig Docker image to get that running. So I would like to find a way to replace that entire geodesic image to something that's sort of transparent on your host.
Yeah.
It could be, in my old days, I would have solved it with a read-only file system that's mounted, a shared file system with everything on it, right?
Right.
That's the way you used to do it. You'd boot it up
on a shared developer EC2 instance.
Yeah, or boot up on a shared NFS route, you know, something that's maintained and managed, right?
Yeah, so this is like the modern day alternative to that, with the added benefit that it works offline too, possibly, if you have it all cache load.
Yeah, but if you were able to mount the remote, you know, an NFS route that has all the tools on it, the only thing you need to care about is your path. But in this case, you need to care about mounting everything on your local disk as well, right, into the actual container itself. So it is another layer of trouble.
Yeah. And I would caution against then like the slippery slope with this. What I don't like about it is like, so you have these containers with the commands in them and possibly scripts in the containers, and then you have your scripts natively locally that are calling the containers that are calling commands that have scripts, and it's like
But you know, one of these cases could be like you're intending to run some of the versions in the container against one of the upgraded versions outside of the container. So I mean, there is a scenario for where you want it as well. So
that is a good point. I think that sounds vaguely familiar as well when you say that, like being able to swap out one of the steps or one of the commands with a new version to test how it works. But good points. All right, so let's see here. I got two other questions, I think, or items on the docket. This is just a quick one. I mean, it's come up a lot, so I don't want to bore everyone on it, but it was specifically asked in our Terraform channel, like, how's everyone running tests for Terraform? And I'm sure the person who asked it probably has seen some of the options and is more curious on what people are using in practice for doing testing. And, this is the question here. So, we provide 100+ examples of how we do it. And if you want to take a look at that stuff is just to go to github.com/cloudposse. All of our modules that work for Terraform 0.12, 13, and 14 have some tests. A more advanced example is with our EKS cluster, which tests that a functional cluster comes online. The downside, so here's the state. So I guess this is the biggest update I can provide, is that the current state of testing in Terraform is complicated for non-developers, people who don't come from a software engineering background, because you do have to pick up some Go, but using TerraTest, which is kind of where the community has gravitated towards for testing, it makes it pretty simple to express your tests if you're used to looking at code like this, and you have the full access to the wealth of Go libraries out there. There's also Test Kitchen for Terraform. I believe the GitHub, Terraform, AWS modules, they do some of that. I'm not sure to what extent they have test coverage. This one does not look like it has it, but I've seen it, I think, in some of them. What I don't like about the Ruby stuff and testing, for the same reason I don't like the Python stuff, is unless this is what your organization uses for everything, you have to install the kitchen sink to get anything running. So that's why I really like the Go-based approach for testing this stuff. The other heads up, which was passed on by Anton Babenko a couple months ago, at this point I think, is that this is on HashiCorp's radar. They are looking into providing a Terraform native way of doing testing. And there is a kind of a proof of concept of this by apparently Mart, Terraform testing provider. And it's a interesting approach to Terraform testing. So the idea is you use this provider to provision some resources. Let's see if I can find this fast enough. And yeah, it provides like this test assertions, and then in there you can specify some of your assertions that you would expect to be true when this module is provisioned, and then it bombs out if that's not the case. So it's a very different approach than what you get with TerraTest, which I think is ultimately going to be n degrees of more flexibility for doing your testing. And the last thing just to point out is if you go to the Cloud Posse test harness, this was our first, that was weird error there. This was our first pass at testing in a basic way. So BATS is this framework written in Bash that is actually quite nice when you do your tests. And what I like about it is that you write your tests in a way that you would be running the commands on the command line. So it's really testing the operator's experience here. And in this case, it's testing to see if your Terraform run is idempotent. So every time I run after applying it, every time I run Terraform plan, it shouldn't show any changes, which is, to be honest, not always the case with Terraform. So this is an example of kind of implementing that, and then finally destroying, and then after you destroy, making sure that the plan shows changes by inspecting the exit codes. There's, we also have some other similar tests here for making sure all of our modules have descriptions defined for the outputs. So here we're just we're calling Terraform docs to generate a JSON representation of the documentation, and then based on that we're using JQ to make sure that the descriptions are not empty. Could this be done in other ways? Probably, but pretty easy to do a one-liner, and I like BATS for that. Any questions on this? All right. So I'm going to post a link to that quickly in office hours. All right, so then the last question that in the last 10 minutes here, I'm really curious to hear what everyone else has to say about this. I'm leaving this to one of our larger sessions in the New Year's, so I'll talk about that in the beginning of January. But for this one here, it's like, what are y'all's 2021 DevOps predictions? What are the trends that probably already started but are really gonna take hold in 2021?
I wonder if beyond Kube is going to get more traction, or if Kubernetes is going to stabilize enough to satisfy people who are looking at it.
I have only heard really rough chatter on the periphery on that. Can you tell me more about Beyond Kube?
Well, over the past, I say 2 years or so, there's been a lot more posts saying like, "Oh, we regret moving on to Kubernetes." Like they got sold it, right? And now people are realizing the complexity that Kubernetes added was like, okay, we have this application. Now we added Kubernetes on it, and now we have like 10 problems, right? Instead of the old ones. I can see where that's reality for many, right? I mean, Kubernetes can do its thing. Kubernetes can have value at a certain scale or at a certain problem, right? It can solve any problem, basically, if the scale is large enough. There's a lot of things being talked about it now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's inevitable that, so what we have are abstractions on abstractions on abstractions, but what's so valuable about those abstractions, just like in mathematics and doing proofs, is they help you simplify the problem into solving other things, and then you can rethink how to do it to get to the answer. So I feel like Kubernetes has been that, the tool for us in DevOps.
Yeah, there's got to be some sort of tool that helps you with these abstractions. Like, when Kubernetes came out, people say one of the things that was said, like, oh, secret is built in, right? But saying that is like, so it's a fraud in a way, because there's so many layers to it. How do you get the actual file mounted into the volume, which references the secret, which references the operator, which pulls it from the storage of the secret? You know what I mean? And who puts it in there in the first place, right?
How does it even get there to begin with?
There's going to be
the genesis story.
I don't know what tool is going to be the magic tool that does that sort of finally gives you this abstraction. It's got to be something soon. I'm
waiting for that silver bullet. And then there's exciting development, right, with HashiCorp coming out with Waypoint, their PaaS solution. Their abstract PaaS, like that. Yes, it works with Kubernetes. Yes, it works with Nomad. Yes, it works with ECS. Yes, it works with all these other things. Is that the Beyond Kube extract? Does that qualify as a Beyond Kube abstraction?
I'm guessing at least for the developer workflow, and maybe also for production. That's the part that's always tricky, right? Because production is always has some sort of caveat, right? Which makes it not work.
It does, and they're necessarily different because you're optimizing, right, for different experiences. Like in production, you're optimizing for stability, reliability, scalability, and for developer, you're developing for like real-time reloading and ease of and speed for reloading. Have you looked at Waypoint as part of this evaluation, since you were also looking into Tilt?
Yeah, that's the first one I tried, but I threw it out pretty early. But maybe not for a good reason. It's just it had a bit of boilerplate that I needed to do with the Waypoint server and stuff like that. So I just skipped it for now. Yeah. But I'll definitely revisit it. One thing though, the biggest thing, and this is part of the complaints at our place, is like, the developers feel too far from Kubernetes, right? Because we don't really have developer Kubernetes. We have a staging Kubernetes, many of them, and then production Kubernetes. But they don't really have anything. So they develop on their local host without Kubernetes. So Tilt, for me, is like, wow, this really made me feel intimate with Kubernetes even, right? The way I use it.
But in a different way. Like you're building some Kubernetes operational competency at some level, but it's totally different than how you're using Kubernetes in those staging and production environments, no?
Yeah, but first of all, my applications doesn't even have YAML that's usable, right? Until I built it now. So that's the first step, right? Creating the YAML for the applications and then putting that YAML Obviously, it's going to be a JSONet template though, but what they will be working with when they look in the cluster is going to be the resulting YAML. And when they diff, it's going to be the resulting YAML. So that's going to help them a lot. And I'm going to put that YAML, instead of it being in a production deployment repo, I'm going to take that upstream and put it in the application itself.
Yeah.
Possibly for Argo to pick up. And I'm thinking also to have a Terraform module in each of those application repos, so that each application has the basics it needs to be able to be customized via variables in production also.
Yeah. So, okay, so we got one prediction there around the beyond. Well, what happens after Kubernetes? Like, this has been great.
I wanna
How do you go on?
I wanna jump in here. Like,
Yeah.
Kubernetes solved a big problem. It didn't solve the infra bullshit and all that. It gave a standard API across clouds and on-prem. And that means that people can now build tools that have way bigger market reach. Like building Tilt and having Tilt run only on AWS is a significantly lower market than AWS, GCP, Azure, and on-prem with Kubernetes. Having that standard API is a big deal. Since Kubernetes started and a bunch of companies migrated wisely or unwisely to it, the landscape around it also matured. Like 2 years ago, Fargate was launched 2 or 3 years ago. I don't exactly remember. But that's a thing. Fargate matured a lot. It's very easy to run containers now. AWS with all their awesome engineers are handling all the production issues for you, and you don't have to stress about it. We did not have that in the time of, I don't know, Cube 1.4 when I started using it.
Yeah. The one thing that I struggle with ECS is like this separation between platform and infrastructure, and ECS kind of muddles the two to me. Where you're still using the same tools to just, basically the complexity of deploying a new task in ECS is the complexity of deploying new infrastructure, versus in Kubernetes is just, here, take it, here's my app, here's my YAML, deploy it.
Yeah, and I think that could possibly also mature next year. But the thing about ECS is that the people who use ECS are quiet, right? Because they're very successful, so they don't need to blog about it. That's my theory, at least. And that's also based on what I've seen at reInvent, for example. The kind of companies and the kind of scale that's presented there when they actually talk about going all in on AWS using ECS. I think ECS ECS problems could be solved if someone sat down and wrote JSONet abstraction for it, actually, and possibly a new CLI that like really fixes it. Although they already did that. They already did
no
that
more
with the
ECS
CLIs.
CLI. No more ECS CLIs. There are way too many. It's getting ridiculous.
I don't know what their own is called. I tested that one as well. It was really easy. That was the best thing I've ran so far. But again, unusable in production.
All right. Any other predictions? That was really good, by the way. I like that one. Any other predictions in this landscape and what we do? Maybe any consolidations?
So I think machine learning and AI is going to be on the slope of enlightenment, I guess. I don't think anyone's actually going to get there, but the DevOps pipelines, I think, eventually will be more driven by machine learning than it is now.
Yeah, I keep waiting to see a little bit more of that come into, what's the word I'm looking for? Like commoditized DevOps stuff that we do. Like Google's obviously doing some pretty amazing stuff around that and shutting down data centers predictively and optimizing costs. But how can we bring this to everyone else beyond spot instances?
Right. And you mentioned before, but value streams and prog streams, I think are going to be very critical for companies to understand what that actually means instead of the fake agile that a lot of enterprise customers do right now.
Yeah.
So it all kind of comes together. I think companies are going to try next year. I think a lot of them are going to fail at it.
Yeah. Any predictions on Lambdas or serverless?
I'm seeing an adoption internally at our place, even here. But again, it's one of those things that's not talked about too much.
Yeah. I feel like, I don't know, just anecdotally, this is not quantitative. This is just, from my conversations, I hear it less, a little bit less these days, and a reversal actually from serverless back to like just simple containers and deployments. But I think that that says more about the company and the team than maybe the technology.
I think you're right about that too. I think more and more people are realizing the correct use for the tools. And I think more and more people who went on board on Kubernetes also realize that, wow, okay, in order to run Kubernetes, there's actually an infrastructure layer below this kind of platform, right?
Yeah.
That's the realization that's coming too.
That strikes a chord with me on one thing that has been a realization for us in our consulting is that I would say 2019 definitely, and part of 2020 we were gung-ho about like, dude, we have Kubernetes, we have this platform, let's maximize the use of it, let's find every open source tool that we can deploy and deploy it there, let's stop paying for SaaS. And we did that, and now it's like, yeah, no, that was a mistake. We have way too much infrastructure, surface area under management. This thing's deprecated, that thing's deprecated. This has been refactored and totally redone. And now I'm like, wait, how can we deploy as little as possible and leverage more managed services for all that stuff that we would have done? Case in point, Prometheus, Grafana, Thanos, Sentry.
Yeah, that's very interesting. For
complement what you're saying with the managed services, I do see that the DevOps community in general has created a streamlined approach where we're seeing the invisible hand theory play out. I mean, you have companies that are trying to utilize saved costs and operations, but in turn, that's creating more technology or greater technology. So.
Yeah. And then in turn creating more opportunities, and yeah, that goes full circle. What? Vlad, you were gonna say something, or someone else?
Yeah, it's interesting because for me, 2019 was the year of observability. A lot of things happened around that, and getting information closer to the developers. GitHub Actions was a big thing in that. Like, you can now live in GitHub UI. You have your code there, you have your deploys there, you have your reports from whatever static tool you're using to check your code and things like that. And that has been a big deal for me. And it also, it's very funny, and it depends where you what network you're in, kind of like what ecosystem you live in.
Yeah.
Like for me, I'm seeing a lot of Lambda, very much of experimentation going with testing in production and feature flagging. I'm seeing a huge move from disposable environments to feature flagging and testing in production, because people realize how expensive disposable environments are. So it depends where in what playground people are in.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a tsunami of emerging technologies. So there's equivalent threats. So with the new technology, there's going to be an equivalent threat or complex operational readiness. So anytime you introduce a new technology or new paradigm shift, there's going to be that equivalent threat. You have Fortune 500 companies that are getting hacked today. We have 50, U.S. agencies, the best of the business, that are correct. That they're our livelihood. So they're getting hacked. So obviously, we need to create a center of excellence around these emerging technologies. Something, it can go from 1 to 100 in 2 seconds. Great, but how do you protect what that payload looks like? So I mean, it's across the board. So I mean, when it comes down to DevOps, even the companies that are utilizing it as a playground, they're still implementing best practices somewhere, because you have someone that's going to fork that code and begin to implement some type of solution, whether it's solving, contact tracing, or essentially solving even a more challenging problem, or what have you. So
Yeah, you had a couple good points in there. I think is that one thing is for sure is that this year we're going to see 24 more new technologies emerge as the way to do it, and that's just going to increase complexity. And yet we keep talking about best practices and like, what does it mean anymore? Like, who can define this stuff when it moves so fast? And the best practices is like, for the month, the flavor of the month, we can't keep track of it. And the other good point you brought up that I really like was like, yeah, we're gonna see a lot more supply chain attacks. I think like this horrible one with SolarWinds that happened, and the other ones we've seen earlier in the year with the compromised Node modules and Python modules, etc. So I guess seeing more maybe that on the Docker side of things, more supply chain attacks there on images maybe.
I mean, it's always the mainstream that's attacked, right? And if DevOps is getting the mainstream and Node.js and all of those tools are the new mainstream, that's going to be the vector, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's not DevOps anymore. It's DevSecOps now. So.
Oh, are you stirring the can?
Yeah. We need to inject.
DevBeanstalk. It's.
Are you from a security team?
No, thanks God.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've reached the end of the hour. I really appreciate everyone's time today sharing and contributing for these predictions. Really good. I hadn't thought of all of these, so thank you guys for stepping up. A recording of this is going to be posted to our Office Hours YouTube channel. Just go to youtube.com/c/Cloud Posse. Remember to register for our weekly office hours. If you haven't already, go to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, if you'd like to book a session with me anytime, just head over to cloudposse.com/quiz, and I look forward to talking with you. So thanks everyone for sharing. We always learn so much from these calls. You are what make it possible. I wish you all a happy New Year's, and we'll talk to you in 2021. Take care. See you guys next week, same place, same time.